The shocking reality of escalating tensions in the Caribbean has just taken a dramatic turn. Survivors from a U.S. military strike on a suspected drug vessel are set to be sent back to Colombia and Ecuador, as announced by President Donald Trump. But here's where it gets controversial. The Trump administration is defending this action by declaring a full-blown armed conflict with Latin American drug cartels tied to Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro's alleged efforts to flood the U.S. with narcotics and criminals. Let's dive deep into this unfolding story, breaking it down step by step to make sure everyone can follow along, even if you're new to these international developments. Imagine this. On a Thursday in the Caribbean, U.S. forces launched an attack on a boat believed to be involved in drug trafficking, resulting in the detention of 2 individuals accused of being part of this illicit operation. According to President Trump, these survivors will soon be repatriated, one to Colombia and the other to Ecuador. This decision highlights the U.S. top secret's aggressive stance against what it sees as a growing threat from organized crime networks operating in the region. For beginners, repatriation simply means sending someone back to their home country, often after legal proceedings or investigations. And in this case, it's part of broader efforts to disrupt drug smuggling routes. Now, the big question marks arise when we talk about the legality and justification behind these strikes. The Trump administration isn't backing down. They're boldly asserting that the United States is engaged in an armed conflict with drug cartels across Latin America. These cartels, they claim, are closely connected to Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, who they accuse of orchestrating the shipment of drugs and dangerous criminals into American territory. Think of it like a modern-day war on crime, where military action is used not just against nations, but against transnational criminal groups. This perspective frames the strikes as necessary self-defense in a battle that's spilling over from Venezuela's borders. But here's the part most people miss. Is this really an armed conflict in the traditional sense, like wars between countries? Or is it something more metaphorical to justify these actions? Critics might argue that labeling it this way blurs the lines between law enforcement and warfare, potentially allowing for broader military interventions without the usual checks and balances. For instance, consider how similar claims have been made in the past during operations against terrorism. Some saw them as essential protections, while others worried about overreach and civilian impacts. And this is where it gets really intriguing. Does the U.S. have the right to conduct such strikes in international waters, or could this set a precedent for other nations to do the same against perceived threats? To clarify for those unfamiliar, an armed conflict under international law typically involves organized armed groups clashing with governments, but applying it to drug cartels is a stretch for some experts. It might empower the U.S. to use lethal force more freely, raising ethical concerns about proportionality and the rules of engagement. On one hand, supporters could point to the real dangers posed by cartels, like the fentanyl crisis devastating communities in America. Millions of lives affected by overdoses linked to these networks. On the other, detractors might ask if this escalates violence in an already volatile region, potentially harming innocent bystanders or straining diplomatic ties with countries like Venezuela. As we wrap this up, it's clear this story isn't black and white. What do you think? Does classifying it as an armed conflict make sense? Or is it just a way to bypass red tape? Should the U.S. take such bold steps against cartels? Or are there better diplomatic solutions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear if you agree, disagree, or have a different take on how to tackle this global challenge. Is this the start of a new era in counter-drug warfare, or a risky path that could backfire?